Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Kay. Kay, welcome to the show. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Same here.
Yeah, cool. Kay and I you found the podcast, or somehow you did some Googling around and you came across me and you watched the video that I did about the diamond and the healing the primal wound. So that's how our paths collided, right?
That's exactly it. I'm a big podcast fan, and I just jumped straight in to the various platforms looking for keywords, and out you popped. So then I got in touch, and the rest is we're here.
The rest is we're here. So, listeners, Kate and I had a conversation last week, and she'd watched this webinar that I did, which is also a podcast. It's called Whole: Healing My Primal Wound. And in that webinar, in that podcast, I put forward my favorite metaphor for trauma, which is if you're a regular listener, you'll have heard it about. It's about the fist and the fist that hides the diamond. So, I've never done. Have I done this before? I don't know. But I haven't. I don't think I've read it out before. Maybe. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to write a poem about the diamond, because one of my mentors sometimes quotes poetry, and I think that they've got a real evocative power of poems. And this is a little bit weird for me, listeners, because I have, at the age of 56, I have now written 3 poems in 56 years. One when I was 10, for Mr. Murgatroyd, or whatever it was, the English teacher, said that we had to write a poem. And 2 for fellow adoptees in the last 2 weeks. And one of them is called Beneath, right? And I'm far better at talking than I am reading off my poem, but I haven't got it memorized, so I'm gonna have to read it off. So this is the poem. It's called Beneath. Your fist fast in fury, white-knuckled in fear, tight and terrified in trauma, locked and alone. Fingers loosen to offer a glimmer, dancing light shards. Fingers unfurl, sparkles grow, light rushes in and bounces back. Palm flat and open reveals, shed of trauma, nature clear. Unveiled majesty shining for all, precious, priceless stone. So that's my go. That's the 3rd poem I've ever written in my life, and it's a go at describing this diamond. And the reason I'm reading the poem is because after Kay and I spoke, she sent me an email about asking some questions after she'd heard the webinar and me talking about the diamond in the webinar. And so the context for our conversation is really to explore the questions that she has asked. And so is that making sense? You're okay with that so far, Kay?
Yeah, so far so good, Simon.
So far so good. Yeah. And so here are the questions. This morning, I was enjoying one of the podcast episodes about self-worth, and I like yours and the guest perspective that it's there, like your £9 Amazon diamond. You just have to uncover it. So self-worth is the diamond. We're using this diamond metaphor, and we're just going to uncover it. So as I read that, what I see is self-worth as a feeling, and as a feeling, do I feel good about myself? Whereas the diamond's self-worth is actually intrinsic. It has its worth just because of what it is. It's not a feeling about. It's not a feeling of self-worth. It's actually inbuilt self-worth. Does that seems a distinction to me? Does that seem a distinction to you, Kay, or am I just making that up?
No, it seems like a fair point. I think, yeah, diamonds have innate value to us for their rarity, and then in themselves they have many innate qualities which we admire, right? No, I think that it makes a lot of sense. So we can
go from there. Yeah. Okay. So every metaphor has its limits. Okay. So if, as I hold my little diamond up to the Zoom camera, the little £9 one, it has a value. It's not a real diamond. It's glass, listeners, but it has a value. The value was £9. That's how much I paid for it from Amazon. And what does it weigh? I don't know, a couple of ounces, a couple of 100 grams in metric. But I also have and so if it as glass, it's £9. As a diamond, I guess it would be worth maybe £1 million. I don't know, maybe more than that. But I've also got a huge diamond, which I'm now holding up to the screen. Now, this probably weighs a kilo or half a pound or something like that. And I've borrowed it off my mum, so I don't know how much she actually paid for it. But it's like probably 20 times bigger than the other one. So that's got that would be worth 20 million quid if my diamond pricing is on track, right? But our worth, our self-worth is, you can't put a value on it. A life insurance company might put a value on it, but to us, our value is absolutely infinite in my view. So, like, you've got kids, Kay, like aren't their values? Aren't their values to you infinite? It's way beyond. It's way beyond, isn't it?
I recently heard a story about, like how the universe, as it's expanding, the possibility of you being here at this point in this time, given all the potential possibilities that exist in the universe, is a miracle, right? And so on that basis alone, being a miracle, we have an enormous value. And one that, again, I agree, you can't put a price tag on. I think that this value ends up being obscured by, in your metaphor, a fist, right? Trauma, poor relationships with key people around you, experiences at school, the workplace later on. And I think that your metaphor really holds for me because, and your poem was really beautiful, because if you can pry away the fingers that hold and obscure the diamond, and you see those glitters, those glimmers beneath your fingertips, and then finally the whole thing, well, it seems that life might be very different indeed if you can see your innate worth fully, clearly, and be able to completely put aside your traumas, your disappointments, your fears, your anger. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, one of the key things about our essential nature, our infinite value, okay, is the fact that we see it what there's a game, isn't it? It's a bit like I guess it's like hide and seek. It's now you see it, now you don't. Now you see it, now you don't. So the fist, the diamond is always there. It's always in the palm of that palm of. It's always in the hand. Sometimes the fingers are furled around it. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes the palm is open, like in the poem, right? But then I guess then at times the fingers snap shut again. They snap shut. So for me, that is the key thing, the key thing that I'm seeing at the moment, right? Because I thought it was once and done. I thought self-realization, the true seeing, like, have you heard that? Realization, seeing the word with real eyes, isation. I don't know. Like I thought self-realization was once and done. So I'm going through life. I'm waiting for some incredible enlightenment experience, and then once that's happened, I will never feel traumatized ever again. I will never feel down ever again. I will never feel insecure ever again. I thought it was once and done because that's what we're promised, aren't we? We're promised by we're promised by people pitching us stuff, pitching us solutions, and we're also, as kids, we're doing most of our learning. So once we've learned to ride a bike, we don't forget. With the metaphorical, again, elephants, elephants don't forget, neither do human beings. Once we know that 2 times 2 is, or 2 times 2, or 2 plus 2 is 4, we don't forget it. The essence of our learnings are once and done. It's a done thing. I know that. I can now move on. Whereas,
but when it comes to self-worth, I think we all suffer from Alzheimer's, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and what's the problem? And therein lies the problem, because we make out that Alzheimer's is or forgetting our self-worth. We make out that that's a problem. I've learned all this stuff. I've learned all this stuff. I've seen who I truly am, and now I've forgotten. Oh, will I ever find it back? Will I be like that's been the song that's been going on in my head for the last 14 years. 14 years. I having a bad memory is not a problem in itself until, well, we were talking about this before, didn't we? Nothing is either good or bad. Only some quote from Shakespeare, right? I'm not really given for quoting Shakespeare, but here we are. Nothing is inherently good or bad. Just our thinking makes it so. So what I've been doing is I've been making my bad memory a problem. I've been beating myself up about forgetting who I truly am. And how useful is that?
I think, just to add something here, I think we have our bad memories that we can tap into whenever we like, because there are memories, there are thoughts. But what I find in my case is that those bad memories get tapped into because events in my present moment, in my here and now, are triggering them. So what, as an example, go to work and someone says, you have to do this task by the end of today. It wasn't in my agenda. I had no idea about it. I've been briefed in really in a slapdash manner. The expectations are sky high, but I don't have any of the resources to do a good job. I know this whole operation is doomed to fail, but I can't say no. Because I find it difficult to put boundaries, something that's come up from my childhood, from my adoption. I find it really hard to displease people, because for me, approval means survival. So these events happen in the workplace here and now, last week. And because I feel that sense of powerlessness that I felt in my childhood, I get triggered back to thinking of all those things that happened to me when I was a child, how powerless I felt. I ingratiate in the pain of the memories so that I feel less alone, more understood, empathize with myself. But really, it's not helping me at all. A real critic would call it self-pity. Someone who was a bit more diplomatic would say it's me, trying my best to cope. But that's why I feel like I have memory loss. Like, I had some times in my life where I really felt my self-worth, where the fingers uncovered the diamond of my innate self-worth, and I felt so proud, so empowered. But why does it get lost? Because, Tom, Dick, and Harry have said something a bit off to you at the office, and you feel really dumbstruck. You don't know, you've got these persistent issues, such as not knowing how to be assertive, that are, if you could only work on them, maybe you would actually be halfway to solving the issue of being able to see your innate worth whenever you wanted. But there are still a layer of problems, neuroses, call it what you will, that trip those memories from the past, and you sort of just spiral into darkness. One mean comment becomes, a weekend of lying in bed thinking, I just don't want to go to work on Monday. I don't want to be faced with what happens next. So yeah, my sort of memory loss comes from perhaps not working enough on some basic boundary setting with other people. And it's taken me such a long time to realize this. And I don't know, Simon, if you experienced, I know that your story is a little different from mine, in that you found out you were adopted later in life, whereas I knew I was adopted from, early memory, so 4 or 5 years old. But I went through life knowing how precarious it was, catastrophizing, worried about being homeless, worried about being chucked out by the only parents I knew, because I'd been chucked out by the ones before them. And so, saying yes, and yes, even when it hurt. And then the ultimate insult of people saying no, no, no to me in return. So there was this absolutely unequal exchange. That's what keeps me in the dark. That's what keeps the fist covering the diamond. That's what stops me from seeing my worth on a more regular basis. Yeah. But I'd be really interested to know if that yes, people pleasing was something that you experienced yourself, or whether that actually just wasn't a factor because you felt that you at that time knew that your parents were your parents, that you weren't adopted, right? When you were growing up in those formative years.
Okay. So I did know that I was adopted. I very young, from very young. It's okay. I was told so young that I can't even remember not knowing. But I didn't have those. I didn't have that feeling of precariousness, or whatever the verb, whatever the noun is. I didn't feel that my life. I didn't feel that my survival was threatened as a young kid. However, I did feel. I did a podcast a couple of hours ago with another adoptee, and I talked about an experience on Facebook that's happened over the weekend, and I felt I felt a visceral feeling of rejection today. Sorry, you're on mute.
No, I didn't want my wow to be caught up in the audio, but okay, you've called my hand. There you have it.
Yeah. So I felt that I felt that today, and I haven't felt that way for a while. I haven't felt that way for a while, but it was kind of it was a very similar situation, a very similar in terms of it was to do with expulsion from a group. They were different sorts of groups, but the background to the potential expulsion, my inability to feel that I was being understood, the inability to apologize in a way that landed for the other person involved was the same. And it was probably about, I'd say it's probably about 10 years ago. And but I did feel, I felt a visceral fear of rejection. So, but was it as bad as it was 10 years ago? Not quite. Somehow, my diamondness, my resilience is stronger than it was. The fist on my around the diamond is not quite as grasped as tightly, and so as I said, the last podcast that I did, we kind of explored that, and Nailin gave me. I think she's a teacher. If I remember rightly, she's also trained social worker and maybe clinical social worker, almost like a shrink as well. But she knows it. She knows her onions, and she helped me to a bit more peace on that, so that if the pain was kind of like an 8 out of 10 at 4 hours ago, after my conversation with her, it went down to probably a 2 out of 10, and hopefully it will tail off. I'm speaking to my coach tomorrow. I will do a bit more exploration of it, and so for me it's a sign that my thinking has completely gone off. It's that I've hit a rumble strip, so I'm feeling under threat. It's that feeling is like a rumble strip. I bounce back off that rumble strip, and hopefully it'll take me back to the to the present moment. One of the challenges is but I have had a lot of feelings of being a lot of school stuff, bullying and scouts bullying, stuff like that. Not good enough is a big, not good enough in business, quite a big theme tune to my life. Not good enough. But our feelings of precariousness, I would say, I haven't had early on. I didn't have those. I didn't have the feelings that you have, and the earlier I think that the earlier that we feel threatened by for our physical safety, the more wobbly we feel. The more that emotional danger gets confused as physical danger.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And when you talked about the fist around the diamond as being white knuckled, so you're really squeezing that diamond, For me, there are two emotions there. There's anger, and then there's sort of a fierce protection. I think that when we forget our self-worth, it's maybe paradoxical. And like you said, there are limitations to the metaphor, but when we see our diamond, our innate worth, and then we still muddy the waters or get bogged down in horrible thoughts and ruminations and completely lose sight of it again, maybe in some ways we're trying to protect ourselves, you know. It could be it's more just blind anger, and you know, we you know, people when they're angry, like the bull charging in the bullfight, it only sees one thing. It doesn't see the full perspective anymore, right? You just, you know, just bloodlust and anger is one tracked. But I would also say that you know, we're afraid of that diamond being cut, I'd say, or stolen or compromised in some way. And you know, sometimes when I get really worried and anxious, it's not without purpose. I ruminate, and my husband will often go, "You're saying the same thing. You're saying that you're talking about the same problem over and over again." And to him, it just seems like circular nonsense, right? Insanity. But to me, what I'm trying to do is go over the problem in my head again and again and look for gaps, look for inconsistencies, look for opportunities to solve that problem. So if I go over it enough times, if I look at it from every angle, maybe I'll solve it. But I'm muddying the waters. I'm filling my head with noise. And often I don't solve the problem by ruminating.
No,
but I'm not.
We can't. The brain is trained to, the brain's only purpose is to keep us emotionally safe. That's what it's trying to do. That's what brains do.
But to follow up with your metaphor, all that noise in your head, all that rumination is losing sight of the fact that you're okay. You don't need to be worrying about all of this and thinking about what's going to happen on Monday morning, or, you know, how to solve this apparently insurmountable problem in your life. All you end up doing is running yourself ragged, thinking without solution, and completely losing the sight of the fact that you're okay. You're okay, as in your innate worth has not been taken away.
Well, there's two different things, aren't there? There's kind of innate worth and environmental safety. So I would say that my challenges are more in the innate worth stuff, and you've got the additional challenge of challenges of the safety. Like if we are going to get knocked down by a bus, mm-hmm. Our sense of self-worth isn't going to keep us out of harm's way. So, I mean, they're two different things. So for my mind, I could win gold for the overthinking Olympics. Okay, so I'm very with you on the circular nature of our brains, and again, that's what brains do. So for me, there's the chink of light there is actually, I often describe this as historically I have worried about worrying. And the guy who came up with the diamond in the horse manure analogy, a guy called Michael Neal, which I adjusted to the diamond in the fist, because the fist is the anger that you referred to. So when my trauma comes up, it tends to come up as anger. So the fist is when we're angry, we hit people. So my metaphor is the fist. Anyway, I forgot what I say. Michael Neal talks about becoming a moron, right? By having more on our minds. So I'm worrying, and then I'm worrying about worrying, and then I'm worrying about worrying. So I'm worrying. Okay, I'm worrying. Then I'm thinking, Simon, you've done all this work on yourself. You've been on those courses, and so you shouldn't be worrying. So the fight is on. It is not with the worrying, but with the worrying about the worrying, to me. And so my rumination tends to be at night. It tends to be in the early hours of the morning. So it could be 2 o'clock in the morning, could be 4 o'clock in the morning, perhaps fine. Right. It ruminates. So the rumination, that's when it comes to me. And I used to be I used to then be worried about, so it wasn't the insomnia. Was it insomnia? It's insomnia. It's a big thing. I was just talking about lying awake. You see the difference? Oh, lying awake. Oh no, lying awake. Insomnia. You're insomnia. Do you see? That's the human. That's the power of words, and that's the power. So you can be one guy's experience. I'm awake for a while. Same guy can call that insomnia. See how bad that is. See how not bad. See how different that is. What I call it. So I would say now that, and I've done this for I've been like that for a long time. I've had that behavior for a long time. I'm confusing my own behavior with my being. Anyway, I've done that for a long time, and I'm less worried about it than I used to be. So, how big is a problem when we're not thinking about it? It's not there. Okay. How big is a problem if we don't think it's a problem? Well, it's not a problem. So,
Peter Slay, the coach who you, Simon, recommended me to reach out to, and I did. He said something wonderful about this. He said humans are very resilient. You'd be surprised at how prepared you would be if something out of the ordinary happened to you. He described an event where he was confronted by somebody. It wasn't a very safe moment, but he was calm. He spoke to the person calmly. The situation was quickly diffused and nothing bad happened. But, if someone had told him prior to that encounter that there was an axe murderer on the loose in his neighborhood, and then he met that, but it would have completely changed his perspective. When we're confronted with things, we as humans are much more resilient and much more able to adapt, pivot, and cope than perhaps we give ourselves credit for. And we're really good, on the contrary, we're really good at worrying about stuff that maybe never happens.
Yeah. And the reason that we're so resilient is because the diamond is rock hard.
Can only be with a laser, a special laser.
A special laser, yeah. But the palm, the fist cannot crush it. The fist cannot, when it can try and crush the diamond, but it's not going to do any damage. The trauma doesn't damage who we truly are. It's like I feel wounded, but there's a difference between feeling wounded and being wounded. Okay, so how would I describe that? How would I take that thing to the metaphor? Right. So my fingers cannot cut this diamond. My fingers cannot break. They cannot break the diamond. They cannot cut the diamond. They cannot damage the diamond in any way. It's a piece of glass diamond, same shebang. Its strength is because of what it is, not because of how it thinks, right? Everybody's going on about mindset. Everybody, the world done the dog. Mindset. Well, we don't need to think ourselves strong, because the diamond is practically indestructible. Practically. Limitations of the metaphor. But you see what I mean? Like, we're worried about the thoughts. What, I talked to one of my coaches. So they mentioned Peter. So Peter has been on the Peter has been on the podcast debating the primal wound with me. So Peter's coaching me at the moment, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes to Peter's episode. But this, I don't know where I was going with that. Our strength is because of who we are, not what we think. Like another coach of mine, one of my first coaches in this area, a lady called Elizabeth Ivory. Again, show notes, link to her book on Amazon in the show notes. One of our typical conversations is, one of our starting points for our conversations, right? If we're okay with feeling not okay, we're always okay. I say that again. If we're feeling okay with not feeling, if we're okay with not feeling okay, we're always okay. And also, feeling okay is quite different from being okay. So the diamond is always okay. It is what it is. It is what it is. It doesn't need to go on a self-esteem course. It doesn't need to do affirmations into the mirror. It doesn't need to write a gratitude journal, right? All these things. I know some people love doing them, right? And I've tried those things and it didn't work for me. If you, listener, if you, Kate, are into doing that stuff and they work for you, great. We all have to do the stuff that works. That works for us. That's the key thing. We're all different. We all have different experiences. Yeah, being okay, feeling okay, two completely different things.
I think being okay with not feeling okay is, for me, one of the most difficult life lessons I still haven't mastered. It's so easy to say it, and yet when you're in the moment not feeling great, for me, it takes a gargantuan effort to be able to step back and observe my thoughts as thoughts and say to myself, okay, here we are again. I have to play all kinds of mind chess with myself to convince some part of myself that this is going to pass. Because when you're in it, you think, that's it. Like, I'm doomed. Like, this is always going to happen. This is never going to really stop. Which may be true, because there are good days and there are bad days. Good days and bad days. It always oscillates from one to another, right? You're never, like you said, going to reach a plateau of self-actualization and never be challenged ever again, and never close your hand over the fist, over the diamond ever again. It's not how life works, it seems.
So it's just me too, right? It's literally, for me, it's literally feeling triggered for a little shorter, okay, and bouncing back a little quicker. That's it. It's marginal gains, right? It's marginal gains and huge leaps, So I came up with this idea of the healing curve last week. And so the healing curve is a bit like the learning curve. But so and like if I did cut my hand, the healing would be linear, right? It's going to take whatever it's going to take, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, for it to heal over, and then it's gone. It's quite a linear thing. It's a smooth curve. It seems to me to be that, when I have cut myself, that's how it seemed to be. Whereas the learning curve seems to be more like steps, not Steps, the pop group, but steps like falling down the steps, right? And Michael Neal talks about this as well, actually. It's like falling down steps. It's like falling down steps. It hurts a bit sometimes, but but life is it's an infinite staircase. It's an infinite staircase. And we never get to the bottom. People say, well, that's a bit of that sounds a little bit sad, Simon, a little bit pessimistic. For me, there's 2 stages. The first stage is seeing the diamond, not theoretically, not in my head, but in my bones. Like, so a feeling that I am the diamond rather than thinking that I'm the diamond. So that's chapter 1, right? So feeling that for the same time, feeling that for the first time, and then that's chapter 1. But then there's an infinite number of chapters. This idea comes from a guy called Rupert Spira. There's an infinite number of chapters in which you, in every chapter, you see it, you lose it, you see it, you lose it, you see it, you lose it, you see it, you see it, you lose it, and you just but the blindness to the diamond, the periods get shorter. I'd say that's it. But you had a fantastic. You were talking about 2 different languages, or the Latin languages having 2 words for knowing, and I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, so in most Romance languages like French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, there are 2 ways of expressing the English verb to know. There is to know of something, to understand it cerebrally, intellectually. And the other way of saying to know is lived experience. I know it in my bones. I've been there. I've done that. I know it. So those 2 verbs, there is no one verb for to know in any of these languages. They split it.
What's it in French? Because I did French A level and I know savoir, but I don't know what the other one is.
Savoir is to know, and connaître. So savoir is to know, as in to know of something intellectually, and connaître is to have that deeper, bone deep understanding of something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of the, I heard this, I don't know who I heard this from. I try to attribute things attribute things, or however you pronounce it, when I do that. But there's, so it might be Michael Neal, actually. Michael Neal. So in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there's a stack of difference between theory and practice, right? So it's a deepening. It's a deepening. It's not a 1 or a 0. It's not a yes or a no. It's an infinite, in terms it matches in really with the infinite nature, doesn't it? The infinite value of who we are, and the infinite curve, the infinite learning curve, or the infinite number of steps.
I have a burning question for you.
Go for it.
We've talked about what it feels like to be a diamond, but I don't think you described it. Obviously, you've got your personal take, but I'd like to know what Simon Ben feels like when he feels like a diamond.
You can't put it into words.
Could you attribute it to a place, a moment in time, a smell, a sensation?
Okay. So yeah, great question. Love it, Kate. So I first, so it's the out breath when I snuggle into bed at night,
That's beautiful.
and it doesn't happen every night, but it happens. I feel it. Obviously, I'm attributing it to the warmth of the bed, but there's something like I told you about the not sleeping thing, right? So a couple of years ago, was it? We tried I tried one of those chain mail beds, mattress toppers. It's not chain mail, is it? Sorry. So kids, I think weighted blankets, that's what they're called, right? So kids who are autistic, I think some special needs kids get recommended weighted blankets. And like I like to have heavy heavy duvet and heavy what's it, eiderdowns or blankets or whatever. I like that weight. I that's I sometimes struggle on holiday. So go somewhere hot, and they've just got a sheet on the bed. I just look at the sheet and I think I'm not going to sleep tonight. So because I like that thing, and I'm sure it must be to do with safety. I'm sure you snuggled and you're cozy, and it's back to the womb, isn't it? You're in a bit of a pressured situation. Like you're in those, whatever those juices are. You're a mummy.
Cocooned, like in a cocoon.
Cocooned. You're cocooned. So yeah, but that feeling that it's a it's a feel of peace. Everybody's chasing happiness, and contentment's a lot easier. Contentment is a lot easier, and peace and contentment are a lot easier than the highs of, I don't know, hearing your favorite music come on when you're in a nightclub. I don't go to nightclubs, but do you know what I mean? At a wedding, say. At a wedding, Barry White comes on, and I love Barry White. First, last, to everything, and there's euphoria, but happiness and peace and content. So that's what it feels like. It's when the thought, when I shared this with you when we spoke last time. It's when the chainsaw, what I think the Americans call them buzzsaws. It's when the chainsaw of my mind stops spinning, and hopefully you've got quite a well-developed mind, from what I can tell. I don't know whether yours is running more revolutions than mine, but I thought you might appreciate that chainsaw mind.
I appreciate the chainsaw. I would love
Not
to share.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
What a great film.
Scared the bejesus out of me, that.
I don't know. I spent the whole last 15 minutes laughing my head off because it was so absurd. But what does that say about me? I feel bad. I shouldn't have admitted that. You can cut that bit out.
No, there's no edits on this show. I don't have time.
It was so ridiculous. No, I'd like to share one moment with you as well, if that's okay.
Of course.
I think I'll share a boring one, and then I'll share an exciting one. A boring one for me was applying to Oxford University when I was 17 years old, because you can't see me on this podcast, but I'm of an ethnic minority. I'm a woman. I've got all the stats against me to get into a very white middle class, upper middle class institution like Oxford. And I was offered the opportunity by my school to do a kind of scheme to fast track me into Oxford, get lower grades in order to get in, because of course, being from an ethnic minority and a woman, I've not received a good education like everybody else. So they're going to go a little easy on me if I want. And I decided not to take the ticket. I decided to apply like everybody else, and I got in. And I got the best grades that I'd ever got. And it was just a moment of just sheer, like, independent, not dependent on anyone else joy. You know, like I had done it on my own steam, not through some kind of shortcut, which, okay, maybe I could have taken it. Maybe it was legit. But that was one moment where I just had this sense of, no, I've arrived. You know, I set my goal, I reached it just like everybody else, and fair and square. So that was one. Another one was many moons ago. Had a bit of a summer romance in Rome. It sounds like it wasn't that serious. It was deadly serious. And I remember at one point, I was standing by the Colosseum, as you do when you're in Rome, and I was texting this guy saying, you know, do you want to meet for a drink? And he was saying, I don't know, I'm tired, I'm sick. And, you know, just being really kind of not into it, you know? And I was thinking to myself, this is normally where people pleaser me would be saying, oh, you know, what would you like to do then? Or, okay, maybe we can meet some other day, you know, just bending over backwards for someone who just couldn't give two flying you-know-whats. And I just thought, you know what, even though I really badly want to meet this guy because I really, really like him, I'm going to tell him, well, if you can't be asked, then nor can I. And I sent that message word for word. And he wrote back, and I pause here. I was devastated. I was like, you're an idiot. You're not going to meet somebody like this very often in life. And you've just rejected him. What an idiot. Of course, he's not going to respond to you. He doesn't care. And then he wrote back 30 seconds later and said, I'm on my way to the Colosseum right now. Yeah. And honestly, it was like, the whole world went from gray and miserable and cold to bright and verdant green. The sun came out from behind the clouds. It was so funny. But it was just so weird how, you know, if you feel okay inside, if you feel proud, if you feel like you've done something good for yourself, like you're cheering yourself on, you're on your team, you've picked you, how the rest of the world seems okay as well. It's odd.
Do you know why that is?
Please, Simon, take it away.
Because our worlds are a projection of how we feel inside.
Makes a lot of sense, you know. The halo effect of that very short-lived but very, very passionate and wonderful relationship led me to feel the world was okay for quite some time. And one thing that I want to share that I realized in the wake of that was typically when I have encounters with people that are not so positive, you know, like bosses that are quite strict, or colleagues who are quite competitive, or, you know, in some cases, family members who are not exactly supportive. In normal times, when I don't have the benefits of feeling good inside, I absorb all the negativity, all the toxicity. You know, they say something to me, I think, gosh, I'm really not that special, am I? I'm never going to amount to anything, am I? Look at the way people treat me. They obviously see I'm nothing. And so, you know, I absorb and I ruminate. But when I left this Roman adventure, and I felt so good about life and so rejuvenated and like alive, when people would slight me or say things that were not so kind, it washed off me, first of all. It didn't absorb, it washed off. And my only thought was, wow, you don't have any manners. Like, instead of me being the problem, their behavior was a reflection of them. And I could see that so clearly. I was unaffected by it. Unbelievable. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life, because I was always the problem. I was always the one that wasn't good enough, to use the phrase that you brought out earlier. And to then realize that if you feel okay and you feel the world's okay, the people who are toxic in it reveal themselves pretty fast, and they damn themselves as well. It's not you, it really is them. So wanted to share that insight, because this is a show of insights.
So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to read out the rest of your email, and then I'm going to ask you if you can take a go at answering your own questions. So to repeat what you said earlier on, so that I read out this morning, I was enjoying one of the podcast episodes about self-worth. And I like yours and the guest perspective that it's there, like your £9 Amazon diamond. You just have to uncover it. Could it be a simultaneous process of uncovering it and also reinforcing it, though? Uncovering it through reframing limiting beliefs and negative events that cloud your ability to see your self-worth, reinforcing it by consciously choosing to nurture certain situations and relationship whilst avoiding others in a way that builds up your prowess of resilience for when the tougher times hit. So would you like to take a go at answering your own questions?
Yeah, I definitely would. I think it is a simultaneous act. I think that it doesn't hurt to learn techniques to distance yourself from negative thoughts that you have. You know, if you're feeling miserable and that life's not worth living, if you have tactics to kind of distance yourself from those thoughts, recognize them as thoughts, and accept that they're going to pass, I think that's a very useful skill to have as a human being. At the same time, if you're not putting your hand in the flame constantly, yeah, that's going to help as well. I have quite a good relationship now with my adoptive parents and family, but it was pretty dire at points in my life. And although it was a very difficult decision, I decided not to be as in contact with them. I decided that if I'm putting my hand in the candle flame, is it any surprise that I get burned? You know, that they are my adoptive family and I do love them and I do want a relationship with them. But if they say things like that or behave that way, then I've got to give them space. They've got a few things they need to figure out, I guess, you know, and I don't want to get in the way of that or be exposed to the blowtorch environment that, you know, they're like a fire hose right now. I need to take a few steps back. At the same time, you know, being empathetic and tolerant helps you hang in there. You know, when I realized that my adoptive mother had, let's say, issues with alcohol and also very, very difficult past, and I was more and more aware of that the older I got and I had children, I empathized even more with her situation. It allowed me to sort of step to one side when the fire torch would come for me. You know, she needed to express herself somehow. And whereas before I got caught in the flame, burned, miserable, terrified, whatever, I learned to navigate her. And I think that that's something that's quite important to do with people who you don't really want to just axe from your life, right? They might be toxic, but if there's a way that you can learn to dance with them, step back when you need to, go in when it's safe, I think that it puts you in a better place to know that you have self-worth, even when maybe their behavior might seem to compromise it. And then the final point that I mentioned earlier, like when you know you're okay, your world's okay, people really show themselves up sometimes. It's actually really striking. And you can either look down on them or you can empathize with them because maybe they've got battles going on that you know nothing about. So yeah, I think it's simultaneous, Simon. I think it's a lot of work ahead, but hey, it's time to roll my sleeves up and get started.
Cool. Have you got a question for me before we close off?
I thought I asked you a banger of a question earlier. You want another one?
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay. Do you think this podcast is going to go up, or is it going to be condemned to
for sure? Yeah, I think you've been far better on it than me.
Oh, well, Simon, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me and turning my questions on myself. That's always a good way of creating a format for a podcast episode. Yeah, thank you. I've learned a lot from you and I continue to do so by listening to your other episodes. And I hope that I've been able to bring something to the table as well.
You certainly have. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you, listeners. And do you want to close any closing words of wisdom for the listeners?
Just that you're not alone. It's been said a lot before, but the more I learned about your community, Simon, and see all the great work and the great books that are written and the experiences that are shared. You might be hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles away, but it really makes me feel that there's a community here. And as an adoptee, that's one of the things that you often feel that you're missing. So please keep up all the great work. And I'm really chuffed to be part of this community in some way.
We're chuffed to have you as part of the community. Speak to you soon, listeners. Goodbye.